off while the final people are just gathering drinks. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Smart Energy Council Sydney Chapter's last event of 2018. Some old faces here, it's always good to see, and some new faces as well.
Not so much of the older ones.
Experienced faces. So the purpose of this Smart Energy Council Sydney Chapter is to provide a forum for networking and ideas sharing here in the city. We host monthly events, usually on the last Tuesday of each month, although we'll have a pause probably for December and January, but that's still to be arranged. On these events we have a speaker who will talk about something new going on in the sector, and tonight we're delighted to have John Grimes, who's CEO of the National Smart Energy Council and who has been leading the charge for smart energy and renewables over the past year with a lot of notable achievements, particularly in the last couple of months. We also like to use this as a platform for students to talk about the future direction of the smart energy industry. Unfortunately, we don't have one tonight, but I know Leo is here. We'll be giving a talk on what he's doing with biofuels in February. So, quick overview of what's happened in New South Wales over the last month in smart energy. I'm sorry to steal any of your thunder here, John. So, I think finally, it's fair to say, after a lot of work by John and others in the space, it's good to see the New South Wales Government putting in place support for smart energy. So there's been 3 or 4 announcements over the last month or so, with grants in place to set up a virtual power plant and support for battery storage in homes. There's also support for schools and government buildings to install solar or storage. And they're also backing up the energy network to allow more renewables to join it. So, despite it being a coalition government and despite ongoing challenges at a federal level, it seems the tide is turning and politicians and decision makers are starting to recognise the public mood and the public support for renewables, which is excellent. I think that will segue nicely onto what John's going to talk about. So as I said, John's the CEO of the Smart Energy Council, who have a New South Wales summit next week. The headline speaker is Malcolm Turnbull, which should be very interesting to hear what he's got to say, given what else has been happening over the past few months. But again, I'll let John touch on that. And John, as I said, has been doing a lot of the advocacy work at the federal and state level, and no doubt will be very busy next year here in New South Wales and federally in the build-up to the election. So I'll hand over to you, John. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Great privilege and pleasure to be back with the New South Wales chapter of the Smart Energy Council. So thanks very much for having me along. What I wanted to do is just give you a bit of a sense of the market. Just talk about the market briefly. Then I want to touch on policies, and then I want to open up for a discussion, because there might be things that you're interested in discussing, and I'd love to have the opportunity to have a bit of a natter about them. So what I might do is step through the presentation reasonably quickly, and then have plenty of time for conversation at the end. So worth just setting the scene. Who are we? The Smart Energy Council. We're a peak industry body, not for profit. We've been around in one form or another since 1954, and there are some real stalwarts of our organisation from when we were the Australian New Zealand Solar Energy Society and beyond, and I'd particularly like to acknowledge Bob Sutton in that regard. Bob's been an absolute stalwart of the New South Wales branch, involved for many, many years, and it's actually on the shoulders of men like Bob that we build any sort of industry today. So thank you, Bob, and others who've been involved for a long time. We've got about 1,000 corporate members across the country, in every state and territory. I push out my email blasts, spammer in chief to the industry, to about 25,000 people, and we're really interested in the intersection between renewable energy, particularly the distributed renewable energy, energy storage at every scale, behind the meter, on-grid, off-grid, large scale, and the smart IT systems, the intersection of energy and information technology, the systems that are going to drive energy efficiency, control and automation, allow for trading of energy. It's actually going to absolutely disrupt the energy sector. We're seeing that disruption starting already, and that's all within the purview of what we're interested in. We do a lot of work in terms of networking for businesses. We provide market intelligence, we provide branding and support for companies, we advocate for consumers. We want consumers to have good long-term outcomes because that builds confidence in our industry and builds a pipeline of work for the future. We also want to give good policy advice because we don't want boom and bust, we want good steady growth and a transformation that brings jobs, investment, upgrades skills and gives us all a dividend right throughout the economy and the community. We're very strong advocates. We do a lot of work. I'm based in Canberra and up and around Federal Parliament House a lot, and that's a big part of our work. Saying earlier to Nick when we got here a bit earlier, you know, I've been in this job now just coming on 10 years. But for the first 5 years, we didn't want to get involved in politics. You know, it's like, and then it became clear that our opponents were so entrenched. You know, we thought, we'll just educate them. If they just saw a report or, you know, they saw the facts, then clearly they'll understand that this is the right policy direction. And that didn't work. And so we made a decision that we would stand up and alongside our policy friends, and we would call out and stand against those that wanted to tear down our industry. And we were driven there because of the polarised politics of the day. But I think it is an important thing that we stand up and support those that support our industry. And that's what we've been doing ever since. And so I told the story to Nick of the occasion that I had working with the Palmer United Party. And the Palmer United senators, it came down to one vote in the Senate to save the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, to save the Australian Renewable Energy Agency. And we walked with those senators to the chamber in their ear to make sure that when they voted, their single vote would be the thing that kept those institutions alive and going. Right? And they did exactly that. So in one of those bizarre twists, I was very proud to stand up alongside Clive Palmer at a press conference in Newcastle, live streamed on ABC 24, and talk about the leadership they have in this field. Today, Clive's got a different agenda. It's about coal mining, so we probably wouldn't have that common ground. But the point is very real. We'll support anybody that supports good policy for this sector. And we want both sides of politics ultimately to see this is inevitable and this is the way of the future. We publish a magazine, and for the first time coming out next week, we're going to push it out electronically. So if you're not on the mailing list, you will get an electronic copy of the magazine. Some of our members, our platinum members, include people like LG Chem, the battery manufacturers, CWP, big utility developers, Lion Group, again, Redback Technologies, Sonnen, a whole bunch of companies there. Some of our gold members include people like ABB, like Caterpillar Energy Systems, BYD, Goodway, GCL, Elgas, Trina Solar, and others. Our silver members, people like Siemens, Mitsubishi Australia, Suntech, and a whole bunch of others, and bronze members and so forth. So we've got about 1,000 corporate members across the country. I'll talk very briefly about the solar PV market. As you're no doubt aware, now more than 2 million Australian homes have solar PV on their rooftops, and a staggering 10.14 gigawatts installed capacity. They're the most recent figures, 10.14 gigawatts. And the average size is 6.45 kilowatts is the average size system that's installed in Australia today. This is the cumulative installed capacity over time, and what we see is that particularly in the last 18 months, the line has gone from a steady growth to exponential growth. Now, I travel to China frequently. I'm probably in China 2 or 3 times a year, And I go and I visit with the major manufacturers, the investors, the EPC developers, policy people and others. And in 2006, I'd be in China, there was 4.5 gigawatts of solar installed in Australia. And in China they would say, introduce us to an EPC partner. Because the history of solar around the world has been big projects, big solar farms, or big commercial and industrial. You know, that's been the history globally. Australia is the outlier. We are the ones that did it backwards, upside down, right? We did household solar. We did small systems installed. And so I'd say, look, an EPC is somebody who builds big solar farms. I said, well, there's a big solar market, lots of systems being installed, but the biggest solar farm in Australia at that time was a 56 megawatt solar farm in New South Wales. The second biggest was the 20 megawatts in the ACT, and the third was 10 megawatts in WA. We didn't do big solar farms. We didn't have big solar farms. There were no EPC developers for me to introduce anybody to because they didn't exist. Today, that's all changed. So here's some data. It shows actually the breakdown of systems by size. And what you'll see there as we move along, you'll see, I'm going to move here, so bear with me on a line. You see here, 2011, 2012, lots of really small systems. 1.5 kilowatt systems, 2 kilowatts, 2.5 kilowatts. Today, this red line is 100 kilowatts plus. So you see that you get a couple of solar farms built, and now we're getting an avalanche, not just of household solar, but of commercial solar up to 100 kilowatts. And then these big leaps above that, which is the big solar farms coming online. So we've got, if you like, we've got three streams of a river. Household, which has always been strong and grows. Commercial and industrial coming from the side, and at the same time the big solar farms coming in as well, and all of a sudden we've got a river much bigger than we've ever experienced before. We do some intelligence reports for our golden corporate members, and we track large-scale projects. Here is the amount of solar PV installed in Australia over time. 2015, about a gigawatt. 2016, a little bit under a gigawatt. 2017, 1.3 gigawatts. This year, 3.8 gigawatts. Next year, we're forecasting 5.1 gigawatts. That is an exponential ramping up, and it's because of the three streams converging. We track large-scale developments through the press. We work with Giles Parkinson as well as a range of others to develop a list, an intelligence list of big projects. And our report, this is the summary. We know that 38 large-scale projects have been delivered, 1.39 gigawatts delivered. Those at financial close that have a PPA in place, so a lot of these are under construction, 3.3 gigawatts under construction with financial close. Other active in the pipeline, we identify 125, totaling a bit over 22 gigawatts. Now, I'm not saying that every one of these is going to be built. They won't. There'll be financial problems, there'll be connection problems, there'll be other problems, right? But a pipeline of that magnitude, these are serious, properly qualified leads that are being developed, are interesting. And I think we are going to have some technical issues, some transmission issues, there's going to be some things that are going to boil up that we haven't seen before, but it gives you a sense of the direction of where this is heading. And it's happening, I'll pause on that, we'll talk about that in a second. How about the energy storage market? This is data from GTM Research, global research. And this shows by 2017, and you'll see that Australia, in terms of megawatts of capacity, in 2017, deployed the most battery storage of any country in the world in 2017. In terms of megawatt hours of capacity, we were just a fraction behind the United States. Now that's not likely to happen for very many years, right? But it does tell you that Australia is right on the front line globally of the deployment of energy storage technology. We completed this report with funding from ARENA. We looked at the behind-the-meter energy storage market in Australia. And what we found, up until 2017, about 45,000 batteries had been installed. Many of those were actually off-grid batteries. There's been a long-term off-grid market in Australia delivering about 2,500 batteries every year for decades. In 2017, about 20,000 batteries were added to that, were installed in 2017. By 2020, our forecast is saying that up to 200,000 units could be installed in Australia. We've got three scenarios. We've got a low, a medium and a high growth scenario. On our website, the Smart Energy Council website, is a resource called Battery Finder. There, we list every battery that has ever been available for sale in Australia. All-in-one systems, standalone, like a battery you can put it alongside a hybrid inverter, and everything in between. And you can go on there and click, and you'll actually get the detailed specifications, the technical sheets for the product, and the warranty documents for the product as well. It's a fantastic resource. It's completely free of charge. Have a look at it. It's definitely worth having a look and having a play. When we do some analysis of the 187 units that we have on that system, about 87% are based on lithium-ion technology. So there's lead acid gel, there's all sorts of different types of technology, but it's the lithium-ion batteries that have taken the largest market share. And of course, there was the big bet. Do you remember this? On Twitter, Mark Cannon-Brookes and Elon Musk having a public bet, and Elon Musk basically saying, we'll get it installed and working in 100 days or it's free. It's a gift to the people of Australia. So that's what sparked it. And then in the Sydney Morning Herald, Mike Cannon-Brookes conceded that he lost the bet because the 100 megawatt, 129 megawatt hour battery had been, from the date of connection approval to the day of construction or connection, is 62 days. So well inside the 100-day bet that was outlined. So really an extraordinary thing. And amazing that an Australian billionaire in a different field and an American billionaire can actually show more leadership and vision for this sector in Australia than our own politicians can. But there you go. And here it is, the big battery, Tesla big battery in South Australia. Now those of you that subscribe and look at Giles Parkinson's work on renewable economy would see a lot of articles talking about how successful the battery has been. Well, I've used that data to actually do a bit of a calculation of the financial viability of the project. The cost was $90 million. Now, I'm not saying that was the full ticket price. If you wanted to go and buy one today, right, the guy was trying to win a bet, right? Nevertheless, that was the price of the battery. In the first 6 months, it generated $14 million in revenue by providing value in 3 value stacks of a potential 7. The rules don't let them get value from those other value stacks, but the 3 that they were able to provide value, $14 million. And every year they have a $4 million contract with the South Australian government to supply backup power. Now, again, I'm not saying that it will continue to operate financially as it did in the first 6 months. Who knows? Who knows what the number? But if it did, and you extrapolated those figures out, the payback time for that $90 million battery is 2.8 years. It's an extraordinary thing. Of course, it's not the only big battery going in Australia. Here's one, actually a very weak part of the grid in Bendigo in Victoria, a project by Fluence, who's one of our corporate members, a 30 megawatt hour battery there. We're seeing now increasingly embedded into renewables projects. They don't have to be, and we advocate that there should be no direct link. Solar storage sit as part of an ecosystem in the whole network, and the costs of storage should not just be put onto solar or wind. But increasingly, people are firming up their projects with some storage. Typically, around 10% of the capacity of the project is now going in terms of the storage. And here's a breakdown. We've listed 55 projects around the country, completed, in construction, at tender, at financial close, proposed totaling 4 gigawatts of energy storage projects across those 55 projects nationally. And of course, the huge potential for off-river pumped hydro storage, particularly being developed through some really leading thinkers and long-time members of our organisation, people like Professor Andrew Blakers at the Australian National University, looking at the potential for off-grid pumped hydro. And the Kidston project in West Queensland, solar farm, wind farm, and a disused gold mine, which is a giant big hole in the ground, which they've filled full of water and they've turned into a pumped hydro scheme that actually firms up, provides energy storage to the big renewable projects. Fantastic, and doing some great work. Federal policy. So we've got a Prime Minister who brought a lump of coal into the Parliament. We've got an Energy Minister who campaigned for a decade against renewable energy. And we've got an Environment Minister who advocates building new coal-fired power stations. So the position federally is not great. Probably been better than this. The bottom line in terms of the federal government's approach, the coalition won't replace the renewable target after it winds down in 2020. And they say that we'll reach our 26% emission reduction target without intervention from government. But we live in a democracy. It's almost election time. This is a very optimistic view. This is a 6-point spread between Labor and the coalition, if in fact that's what's translated in the federal election. At the moment, the polls are sitting a 10-point spread, not a 6-point spread, but a 10-point spread. Who knows what it'll be? How will it all turn around? I don't know. But even if you were quite conservative, basically, Labor's got every chance in the world to pick up government federally. But it might not happen until May. But it's worth then reflecting on what the alternate government would do if elected. The Labor Party has a policy of 50% renewables by 2030. They have a 45 emission reduction plan for the whole economy by 2030. And they were talking about implementing that in the style of a National Energy Guarantee, a NEG, where the emissions target would be for the energy sector at least 45%. Now, many of us argue that the electricity sector must do more than that. That actually, to find cost savings in other parts of the economy, emission savings, in agriculture, in transport, in manufacturing, is really expensive. In energy, actually it saves you money, right? Because it's the cheapest form of electricity and it cuts emissions at the same time. So we think actually energy could do more. And you might have seen the announcement last week. Labor have announced a target of 1 million batteries by 2025, starting with a $2,000 rebate for 100,000 batteries in the first round. When I think about all these things, I think about the national conversation, I think about the business groups, I think about our federal policy. What I come back to is this immutable fact. This is Origin Energy in the press, and they say renewables today in Australia are cheaper than the marginal cost of black coal. They are very, very cheap. Let me just pause with that for a second. So obviously, if you've got a new coal-fired power station, it's going to cost you around $125 per megawatt hour to build a new one, right? That'll be the LOCE, right? The amortised cost of that plant. To build a new solar plant, we're sitting in the range high 40s to probably 60. Wind, low 50s to probably 60, 65. Right? So versus 125. So renewables just absolutely beat new coal, new gas, but certainly new coal. But with the fleet in Australia, where the fleet is ageing, it's a bit like an old car. You can keep propping it up for so long and then it requires really major investment. And what's happened with these old coal-fired power stations that were built and deployed in the 1960s and the 1970s is that they're a bit like a clapped old car, right? They're actually very expensive to keep them going. Places like Liddell Power Station, for example. And so when you get to the point where renewables are cheaper than the marginal cost, than the cost of just keeping the old bomb going longer, cheaper than the cost in some cases where the cost of keeping the old girl on the road is more than the cost of new renewables, even if the coal were free of charge. Even if the coal didn't cost you anything, there are other embedded costs. So once you start to get that, so someone like Origin saying that renewables are cheaper than the marginal cost, the running cost, the existing running cost of existing coal-fired power stations, then you know you're on the cusp of a very, very significant transition. And I think that's where Australia is today. That's it. Questions? Comments?
Cheaper than coal, your cost dollars per megawatt hour. See these figures bandied about, don't see any detail behind them. How many large-scale solar panels we've got, the landed cost, the sun not shining, and transmission costs, etc. And then what cost you put on the dependability, continuity of the UK as well.
Now, it's worth saying I'm not an energy economist, so we have some very bright people, including on our board of directors, people like Simon Holmes Court, who are energy economists, and I'm sure they'd have a discussion with you in detail. The punchline, if you like, what they tell me, is that we are at that point. It is difficult to get precise figures out of some of these because they're privately owned, so they're not giving precise figures about the running costs. But first, new renewables beats new coal hands down. Just not even doesn't even come close.
So then you're talking about the 24/7, 365, 50 years, right? Or are you talking about middle of the day when you've got sun at the zenith and a couple of hours when
and I think we should actually have a separate presentation on exactly that point, because this notion of base load, that you've got to have base load that's basically, inflexible generation that you turn on, that you basically can't turn off, and that's why electricity is basically free or given away in the middle of the night because there's no demand. To move instead to a portfolio of technologies and a portfolio of approaches that layers different technology sources, including energy storage, to actually give you a reliable supply that matches a flexible demand. Absolutely doable, and I would suggest that we even tag that as a topic for a separate presentation. I think it's really fascinating. I think that's a conversation and an education piece we've definitely got to do. I might just pass to you, Matt.
Well, this is a good question, because from the list of projects in under the universe, what's your feeling? How many projects do you think that you implement today, considering that with the policies that we have, that of course we steer the funding and also the risk of interconnection? How many projects do you think that because we have these very nice figures that we're going to have this massive capacity next year, but how many projects do you think are going to have?
It's a fantastic question. Another member of our board of directors is Oliver Yates. Oliver was the founding CEO of the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. So there's probably nobody in Australia better qualified than Oliver to talk about the economics of how we do this. He thinks that it could be as little as 10%. And there are two reasons for it. One is increasingly investors are looking for very strong PPAs. So they need, really, and there has to be some merchant risk as well. So that's the first problem. The second problem is the grid infrastructure, the curtailment of projects. And that's why you've got to think about storage and flexible storage, which might be a combination of both batteries and also pumped hydro storage, as being the answer. So I think Oliver's a little bit pessimistic, but I certainly agree that we're not going to see like 22 gigawatts come through in a short space of time. And that's why I think actually the Labor policy of putting $15 billion, $10 billion into the CFC, $5 billion into transmission is so central. Unless you get the infrastructure right, you can't plug all this renewable into it. And so that's why it's an important two-step process. It's all connected.
There was a report given by NCCC this year that suggests a failure to abolish the rooftop solar subsidies.
Immediately, because uncertainty in industry and for consumers. They have ruled that out. So at this stage, the federal government does not intend to abolish the SRES in 2028, which is a big win for actually the pressure that we're able to put on them and others work as well. So that's a good thing. And Labor has been very clear that it does not intend to make any changes to the small scale scheme. So at this stage, I don't foresee any changes in the near future for any of those schemes.
One of the things I like doing on public transport these days is looking around and seeing an idea of how much penetration of solar is on rooftops. And so a lot of the apartments going up and down, numbers changing so well. Is there any move to try and get apartment buildings that have their roofs often now flat, at least angled facing north optimal solar generation? So at some point, given the economics, it will become very competitive, compelling for starters to actually get the panels and then put a battery there.
Definitely.
And bypass one of the problems that a lot of households have, which is if they're not sure how long they're going to be in the house or they're going to eventually get their journey back. Whereas if it's starting at a building level, it's a different question, you might get leakage.
So at a macro level, the national leaders are places like Queensland and South Australia that are both sitting over 33% penetration for households in those states. New South Wales is one of the country's laggards. It's not as bad as the Northern Territory, but it's not too good. It's sitting at about 16.9%. So there is a long way to go for New South Wales on a per capita, on a pro rata basis, to catch up with those other states. So there's a lot more that needs to be done here. In terms of renters, I met with one of our member companies during the week, and their business model is they'll come into a rental property, put solar and batteries in for free, pay the landlord 5% of the energy bill, and tenants can either agree to take that energy at a substantial discount from the grid or not take the energy at all, and they'll just set it in through a feed-in tariff. When I see those business model innovations that open up that sector, I get really excited because they've kind of been the forgotten people. I understand your question.
You know, if they have to work at a large scale, probably at a smaller scale, is what if you're not sure how much property is going to physically exist.
I don't want to keep harping back to ALP policy, but it's kind of fresh in my mind. There is a group, Nikki Ison works with community solar. You know, these community solar farms, which are kind of people who are renters or can't afford to have their own system, can buy a share in a solar farm and participate. And there is funding for that in what Labor's announced as well, and we'd really support that.
Yeah, but I'm just thinking about sometimes when we look at these and the houses on the lot side, you think that doesn't seem to be an optimal roof location. So I'm starting to think about making sure that all the optimal roof locations and the light orientation are actually utilised so we get the biggest bang for buck out of the area.
So it's been really interesting. Again, you know, I really think that some of the low-hanging fruit for us collectively is energy efficiency. It's orientation. It's good design. It's good building materials. You know, the problem is that the policy makers and the local governments in particular, they're very, you know, the control of that. They're still embryonic in their thinking. They haven't even started that journey. I think we've got a long, long way to go with that discussion. So unfortunately, I don't see great examples of it. I have seen one in the ACT where new developments have all been oriented north and have been mandated, must include, I think it's a 3 kilowatt solar system. Right. The only thing is, then I see the press reporting where there was an isolator switch, you know, which are a dumb idea to put on people's roofs, but they're on people's roofs, that the weather got into, and it sparked a fire. And then you had someone saying, well, I didn't want the solar system, they made me have the solar system, and now I had a fire on my roof, right? So you can't win. But yes, we've got a lot more to do in that space.
I have a question with regards to reconnection of large-scale solar farms. There's been delays, as you might know, of most of the reconnection of large-scale solar farms, and it's not clear who should be responsible for conducting the PPA studies, the general performance standards for the grid. In some cases, they were manufactured with an allocated responsibility. In other cases, it's the electric owner. In other cases, it's the EPC. And in other cases, even they will have a lot to say to this. Who do you think should be modeling not only the grid, but the actual studies that are required?
I understand. I actually don't know enough about it to give you a definitive answer. But what I do know is that there's a lot of frustration in this space. Sometimes different networks require different materials, different information to be submitted. The fees between different network service providers can be really vastly different. Some actually process applications in a timely fashion. Some are absolutely terrible. I've heard in some press reporting say that one of the, and I don't necessarily defend RCR Tomlinson, you might have seen the big development company who recently went bust, and over, I'm told, in large part to some of the big solar projects that they had. And some press speculation saying that requirements from IEMO to do these connection studies were overly onerous and really unnecessary and created a huge burden on the project developer. So I do know that there's a lot of disquiet. I do know that we've got a lot of members in this area, and I'd be very pleased to link people together. And I'd be very keen to get some advice in terms of what our position should be, because if there's things we can advocate for that will help solve the problem, we'd very much like to do that.
Related to the question about the big question, compared to the way things work in Europe, it says that when we want to create a project, for instance, in England, there is two components. One of them have minimum requirements, you need to comply with, and then you have this component of the monitoring of these requirements. So we just continue to the same thing, and some of these requirements of your project needs to be changed to be able to ensure that you're causing disturbance. But it says that the way it is working here is that the requirements are upfront. You will have to comply with many requirements that it makes it very onerous list and very difficult to work the project. And I think that's the main issue. I think they will have this component of monitoring the project. They just want to comply with everything and everything, and this will be that. Is there a reason other than for the building infrastructure very long piece of this stable? Is there any reason why you need to comply with everything right at the very beginning?
I don't think so. I think it should be a much more transparent and open process. There are companies that start this, they do a study, then they're told we want this specialist study, it's going to be $50,000, we do that. There's no guarantee of anything at the end of that process. And what you're saying is that the UK has a much better streamlined process of getting renewable energy projects integrated into the grid than we do here in Australia. That's an indictment on how we do things in Australia. I'm not saying that there aren't valid technical things that need to be taken into account. They absolutely have to be, and they have to be properly managed. But I think, for example, one of the things that I've spoken to network operators, grid operators about, is developing a traffic light system for commercial and industrial stock. Because people go out and they sell a 100 kilowatt system, they make the sale, go in, and then they're told that the network there is full, right? We don't accept any connections there. Well, that's completely opaque. How do I know that the network's full in that substation, right? Wouldn't it be better if they actually had a map that showed, here it's red, don't bother selling here, right? We're not going to connect you, right? Or you're going to be zero export limited, right? Here it's orange, come and talk to us first before you go too far. And here it's green, actually it'd be really helpful if you could put some more capacity out here, right? So these are simple things that we could do, and we need to get smarter at doing things like that.
Could you say some more about this, grid limiting in certain streets in certain areas?
Yes.
Where over a certain, I think it's 255 or something, they reduce the inverter feed the grid.
Yes.
And all the way down to nothing and so forth. Can you say a little more about the numbers about that?
Yeah.
That's a recent thing, or that's
Sure.
a new thing, or
So-
and I understand our script can quite able to fix it.
So that's right. So again, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I'm going to give you a layman's version of it. But the settings for substations in particular lines mean that as more solar is connected, in some cases the voltage is going above their mandated critical sort of level, and so that they're actually, it's causing problems. There's tripping off systems, tripping off inverters, and so forth. And they're just saying no more connections in this area. There are two things that I've heard that just intrigue me. The first is from network engineers who've worked inside those energy companies who say the substations are tapped at the wrong number, right? They're actually, if they just set the setting up when they're installed at a different number, you'd have much more ability to put in more capacity in those areas. So the tapping of them, the default tapping is silly, and they should be doing a different default tap, right? If you come out to try and change it retrospectively, it's a $2,500 exercise, and then someone's going to pay for it, right? The second thing, though, is I talk to the innovative companies that we have, people like ReposiPower. They tell me they have a small device that they can put in substations that gives the operator full visibility of exactly what's happening and the ability to remotely control and overcome the issue in those places. And I'm told it's a very simple and quite cheap device. I met with, I won't say the network operator, but a state-based network operator recently, and they were talking about their network, and I asked them, what visibility do you have? How smart is your network? And they said, we have no visibility at all. This is a completely dumb network. We can't see what's happening. I was like, okay, well, what would it take? What would it take to actually then put the sensors out there to give you full visibility and therefore a degree of control? It was like, about $60 million? $60 million sounds like peanuts to me. Why wouldn't you do that? That sounds like a no-brainer, right? And of course they're like, oh yeah, that's fine, but we want to get want the customers to pay for it. So that's kind of it's a commercially owned business. So it seems that we've got to get smarter. The disruption is going to happen, and technology is going to drive us there. So that's why.
Can you make a comment about hydro projects? Are there many projects on hydro?
So there are lots of sites that are identified. At this stage, pumped hydro gives you a very different type of storage to, batteries or what have you. It gives you long duration storage. So, hours, potentially days, potentially interseasonal. If you're talking about Tasmanian Hydro as being the battery of the nation, for example. But the prices are pretty high. They're sitting at about $160 starting point up to about $250 per megawatt hour of capacity. So it's quite expensive, but it gives a unique operation. So I'm really fascinated about pumped hydro. I want to see the first projects come on. I think that what we'll find is a bit like concentrating solar thermal. As we do a few, the price is going to come down. It's going to be cheaper than we thought, but you don't get that learning until you've done a few. So like you, I'm very keen to watch how this plays out.
To know your views on solar thermal power generation systems compared to, because I have been very lost on solar PV, and you said the industry is moving for large scale solar power plants with PV, but you probably are aware of large projects in South Australia, for example, Aurora solar power plant is solar there. And I just want to know, I would love to know the Smart Energy Council view on solar thermal power generation, if you actually support or...
Sure. So, Solar Reserve are a really important member of ours. We help them a lot in terms of advocating and getting in front of both the South Australian government and pushing that project. It's an iconic project, concentrating solar thermal, so using mirrors to concentrate the sun's energy to a central point, in that case using molten salt as a fluid, storing it in big insulated tanks and being able to draw off that to provide energy around the clock. I think solar thermal is fantastic, and I'm really worried, because collectively we seem to have made a decision that the race has already been run, right? And the winner was PV, right? And PV had 40 years to come down the cost curve for the production to double and then double and then double, and for the price to fall by 26%. So it's really cheap. It's a huge scale. But in my view, solar thermal has only just started the race. We're only just starting, and already people are surprised that that project in South Australia is sort of sitting around $100 per megawatt hour or less. Which is a lot of people just wrote it off completely. And I think as we do more of these projects, the learning curve is going to drive, we're going to learn more, and I think solar thermal's got a big future. I'm a big advocate for supporting solar thermal because we don't know ultimately where it's going to end, and it's very helpful in terms of having that stored capacity to produce, flexible, dispatchable, renewable energy.
With the later opposition announcement of the battery program, what do you think can or will be done to avoid what the media refer to as batteries?
I saw this. So it was kind of the response. So Chatham House rules. Okay, please don't attribute this to me. Right? Please
Turn the video off.
Turn the video off. I might be careful what I say. But that's okay. Let it go. Let me obscure it in some way. So we had the opportunity to speak to a senior federal government minister the day before the announcement. They were very supportive of batteries. And then the day of the announcement, it's pink bats to pink batteries. We're actually just toying with an idea that we might get a battery manufacturer to donate a battery which we make pink. That we sell it via bids, right? We sell it via bids. We donate the money to a cancer-related charity, and talking about the good that pink batteries are doing in the world. But that's just the troublemaker in me. So no firm plans at this stage. But look, I think it's a desperate attempt to claw at something. Not to say that batteries don't need to be properly managed on the rollout. That is serious, right? But remember, the only person who can install a battery is a Class A electrician, right? Someone with an electrical licence, who's gone through additional training in terms of design and install of batteries. There's a lot of state electrical regulations about it. There's a lot of industry support. There are best practice guides. There are Australian standards about to be launched. There are national training modules. So I think the comparison to pink bats, where you had kids with thongs in rooftops and batteries, is just not a credible one to make. So, now, I might end there because there is something else I want to talk about before we pass over. And that is the Smart Energy Summit that we're holding on Tuesday in Sydney. Has anybody registered to attend? Fantastic. So, see me, because I want to talk to you about something. But here's the thing. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers. People like Don Harwood, the New South Wales Energy Minister, is speaking. Simon Holmes of Court is speaking. Simon Corbell is speaking. John Dee is speaking. Some of the big developers of those big projects we've talked about are speaking. And we've also managed to secure Malcolm Turnbull as a speaker at the event as well, to give us his vision for a smart energy powered Australia, which he's graciously agreed to do. We are a not-for-profit organisation. Just means that we're a business like any other business, but we don't make a surplus that we pay back to shareholders. We actually use that money to reinvest in the advocacy and lobbying and in the outreach and education support that we do. We've got a room, it's at Daltone House, which is Daltone House, Darling Harbour. And they tell me it's like a 6-star venue, just near Star Casino there on the harbour. Apparently it's absolutely magnificent. Beautiful venue. We've got a room that holds 550 people. At the moment I've got 150 registrations for this event. I need to get 550 people in the room. So I'd like to enlist your help, please. What I'd like to do is 2 things. One, that's why I want to see you afterwards about your registration standing. I'd like to offer people who've come along here tonight our students' rate of $150 as a silent offer. It's not something that we're going to publicise, right? So it's fully catered, right? Morning tea, lunch, afternoon tea, networking through up in your boat and paddle home. But I really would like to get your help to spread the word about the event. I've printed off a whole bunch of flyers here. It'd be really great if you could take them and share them. And I've got it in electronic form. So if you give me your email address, I'll send it to you. If you can circulate it and let people know. I think being in the room while Malcolm Turnbull talks about this stuff is going to be a hoot. But I think there's some really good policy people there too who are going to provide really good substance. So otherwise, normally tickets for non-members are $398. So it's not one of these, the Quest events. They do this 1 day or 2 day event. It's like $3,500. No, that's not what we do. So if you could help spread the word and get people there, I'd be really awfully grateful, and it would help secure us financially. So flyers here, and I might just grab your email addresses if you want the electronic flyer. One tiny final last thing before I say thank you to the hosts here, and that is just to remind you that we have our annual conference each year in Sydney at at the International Convention Centre at Darling Harbour. It's the 2nd and 3rd of April. We have over 100 speakers in 3 concurrent streams. We'll have about 6,000 delegates. We'll have about 120 speakers, really great speakers, you know, from all around the world, in fact, including a few that we're hoping to get in via video link who will be some special surprises, I think. It's absolutely free of charge. So use the opportunity to come along. It's a great networking opportunity, great education opportunity. If there are students in particular, spread the word, because it's great for students to come along and stay in touch with what's happening in the industry. So that's it.
Thanks very much, John. Thank you, John. That was a great way to finish our events for the year. We'll be back next year in February, but hopefully we'll see most of you on Tuesday at Dalton House. As John said, great headline speakers, and then also a great programme, and I think a lot of those more technical questions that some people have asked will be answered throughout the day as well. So it's set to be a very good event. Look forward to seeing as many of you there who can make it. If not, we'll see you in the new year, and we'll send updates around about the next event. And John will be at the back for a drink following this, so help yourself, and I'll be networking for another half hour or so.